Right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Mike. In case you don't know me, I know some people invited some guests, some folks I were on the list that I didn't know, but welcome to everybody. I am, like I said, Mike, from Houston, Texas. We're going to be talking about capturing the eclipses that are coming up here shortly. I know everybody knows about the solar one. If you didn't know, there's actually a lunar eclipse the second week of March as well. We're going to talk about that as well. So welcome. What we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about how to capture solar and lunar eclipses. We're going to talk some terms and vocabulary that you may hear wrong or right, especially if you start reading news articles as we get closer, because the news doesn't know what they're talking about half the time. I noticed it with the annular eclipse last October. Half the time they were talking about what happens during a total eclipse, which is what we're having, versus the annular eclipse. So we're going to make sure you know the right terms. Talk about some gear and some apps that you can use, how to plan for the eclipse, setting up your camera. We'll go over the lunar eclipse. And then at the very end, if you're still here, everybody is entered in a giveaway. I've got a couple door prizes to give away. Dan, you won't win. Don't worry. So if you have any questions at any point, feel free to shout out. If you do, make sure if you do have any noise in the background, since I'm recording, if you'll keep that on mute, and unless you have that question. And so let's get into this. What are we trying to capture in the skies? What we're talking about tonight are solar photos, just in general, solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. And before I go any further, I wanted to talk about a couple things that I have upcoming. Some of y'all already know about these. Some of you already attending or signed up, but I have a couple workshops and speaking engagements on March 13th in the Woodlands, Texas, which is one of the suburbs here in Houston. Be teaching to the Woodlands Photography Club about eclipses and night sky photography. March 30th, which is a Saturday, be doing my 6-hour PPA merit workshop on capturing the night skies. May 18th, creating historical photos. It's also a merit workshop. And then in July, from July 6th to 10th, going to be in Lake City, Colorado, teaching a 4-day in-person astrophotography workshop. So I've got about 10 spots left in that. If you're interested at the end, let me know and I can get you information on that. You can either visit my website or PPGH to sign up for those as well. Sorry, guys, I'm letting people in here as we're going. So yeah, if you're interested in any of those, let me know. And I'd love to have you in any of those workshops. Again, Lake City, Colorado, up in the mountains. Lake City's about 9,000 feet. July will be absolutely gorgeous up there. And we're going to play up in the mountains. So let's get into a few terms on eclipses. Most of these are going to deal with the solar eclipse, since that's mainly what everybody's here for. So we have a few common terms. Annular eclipse, this is what we had last October. I'm not going to read all this to you. That was the Ring of Fire one that we got. The total eclipse that we're having in April. These are a couple of things. Bailey's beads. There are these brilliant lights. I have some photos of those later on that come off once we're in totality. The corona is the atmosphere that you can see during totality. And then the diamond ring is a single Bailey's bead. Again, I'll have photos of all these here in a little bit. But diamond ring is one of those photos everybody's trying to get. It's the brilliant flash right as we enter and we exit totality. Um, Total eclipse, which is the one that we're going to be having, is where the diameter of the moon is large enough to completely cover the sun's photosphere. Totality is that point when we are totally covered. We've got a good one with this eclipse. It's about 4.5 minutes max if you're right on the path of totality, which is a pretty decent amount of time. They can literally last from a couple seconds to up to 7.5 minutes is the longest one. And then the umbra is the darkest part of the shadow, which is where, as photographers would like to be. And creates that totality. So visual, if you don't remember from Earth science and how many ever years ago it was, some of us longer than others. This is what it basically looks like. The sun, the earth, and the moon, or excuse me, the sun, the moon, and the earth align. You'll have a partial totality. That lighter gray is the partial eclipse. And then you have the total eclipse, which is that darker part. And you can see the umbra and the preumbra identified there. So the annular eclipse, this was my shot from last October's. Unfortunately, got cloudy at mine. So all I got was filtered through the clouds. Still got some great shots, so I was happy, but wasn't quite what I was hoping for. Total eclipse, and these aren't my photos. I've got several photos that aren't mine just because I haven't photographed one before. But this is what we're aiming for is that kind of cookie cutter bite out of the sun until we get to totality, and then kind of the emergence of the sun, and then during that catching this is going to be the corona around coming out from around the moon and showing. So that's what we're hoping to see when we see things. Why April 8th, 2024, you may ask. Some of y'all may already know this answer. The next one's not for another 25 years in America. This is the next several years. Kind of shows you where some of them are in the future. We had the annular and the total crossing the U.S., and we don't get another one until August 23rd, 2044. That one's going to be mainly up in Canada. If things are all going right, I hope to be up in maybe Banff or Jasper for that one. But already planning on that one. Got to plan ahead. Then in August of 2045, we get a total solar eclipse that'll be pretty comparable to this one, where it'll cross a big chunk of the United States. Quick knock on safety, and I think everybody knows you never should look at the sun at any time unless you have good solar glasses. You don't want to ever point your camera without a filter at the sun. I have seen photos. I couldn't find one. I was trying to find one. I saw one last October on Facebook and I couldn't find it, of someone that did not have a filter, and it had a nice burn mark right in the middle of the sensor and just kind of melted through the back of the camera. Be aware of traffic, and we're going to talk a little more about this in a minute, is going to be crazy. So just get where you're going early, stay late if you need to avoid some of that traffic. And one of the other presentations I watched last October was talking about fill up your gas tank that morning or the night before. That way you've got a full tank. So if you're stuck sitting in traffic, you're not running out on empty. I know one of the presentations I watched was a couple that had been to, I think it was, they photographed 36 eclipses all over the all over the world on all 7 continents. And they said that's one of their biggest tips is fill your gas tank, the day before, because you may be sitting in traffic for 5 or 6 hours afterwards as people leave and just kind of mob out of the situation. So let's talk gear. Kind of a smattering of things that you may or may not need on this page. But what is it that I really have to have as far as gear? Well, you need a camera, obviously, either DSLR or mirrorless if you've been lucky enough to move up to that. You do want the ability to either run or plug in a intervalometer or a trigger. Full frame or crop sensor is fine in this situation because you're actually using the distance or shooting something so far away. Crop sensors actually have a little bit of advantage over a full frame just because you get that extra focal length. I always recommend shooting in RAW on these in these sort of situations because it gives you the most ability to work on those images afterwards. And some people I know will shoot RAW and JPEG at the same time. If the other cameras allow it, that's up to you, but I always suggest shooting in RAW. So what lens do we want to choose? Well, you're gonna want to use a telephoto lens. This chart I found I liked. It kind of gives you a good idea of the size that you're gonna see it on your final photo. Once you've done based on which focal length, excuse me. Obviously anything under 200 millimeters is going to be pretty small, even if you crop in, unless you just have a ridiculously large sensor that you can zoom way in, like some of what is it, the Fuji that has 100 megapixels. You're going to want something longer. The photo that I had earlier of the totality of the annular was shot at 600 millimeters. I'm actually looking at possibly getting an 800 millimeter prime from Canon if I can get one from CPS to put on one lens and then have the 600 on the other and have 2 cameras going possibly during the eclipse. So but the closer you are, the further you can reach out, the better in this case. Now there are a couple times where you may want to be a little bit further out to get all the corona reaching out around the sun. During totality, you may need to zoom out from the 600. It'll just depend on how you want to compose that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Tripod. I would definitely have a tripod and not try to handhold and shoot just because you are going to want to reach out. Sturdy is obviously the key. Carbon's expensive, but if you don't have a good tripod, they're definitely worth it. Since we are shooting the big telephoto lenses, if you make sure your head is a good tripod head that can handle the weight of the camera and your telephoto, if you haven't used those together before. And like I say, most of the time the little travel tripods don't handle the weight well enough and handle the especially if we've got any wind or anything, they don't work very well. All right, filters. This is one of the things I get asked a lot about. There's several different ways you can do it. Ideally, one of these three is the case. The Mylar filters, see over on the side here, they're kind of got a silver coating. You can also get a film, just an actual piece of Mylar film. I was supposed to have one, but Amazon didn't deliver it today, so I don't have it to show. But they have. Dan, you've got one, don't you? If y'all look at the videos, if you'll pull up Dan Emmerman, he's got a piece of it. He can show you, and those can work really well because you can wrap it around any size lens. Neutral density filters are also a way you can go. I'm going to talk about some disadvantages. And every once in a while, you can use no filter. I don't recommend it unless you're really brave. So what is a Mylar filter going to give you? What the Mylar filter actually does is it is a white light filter. And you will get an image similar to this one. Now I had some clouds at this point during the eclipse. So that's some of the dark spots, but it gives you just that bright orange color. Neutral density filters are going to give you a similar, but a little bit more washed out color. You want to, if you do a neutral density, you want to use at least a 16 stop neutral density filter. You can stack neutral density filters. Just remember, every time that you stack a piece of glass together, extra piece of glass, that's one more piece of glass that your image is going to pass through, and you may lose some of your sharpness and look of the photo. So if you can, ideally, I would suggest the Mylar filters. But if in a pinch you can't find a Mylar filter, a new 16 density, 16 stop neutral density filter will work. Now I did check. There's a couple different companies that will that sell the Mylar filters. Thousand Oaks is the one that I recommend, and I will actually post this in the chat because I forgot to put their website on. When I went to their website last night, they actually had screw-on filters up to 95 millimeter, down to I think it was 50 something millimeter available for sale that will be delivered before the eclipse. Amazon had a few. If you get on Amazon, they had a few different ones available. When I talked to Precision in Austin and Houston, and Houston Camera Exchange here in Houston, they all had filters. I forgot to call Arlington, but I would bet they probably have some too. And I know B&H and Adorama also had some in stock when I looked at the web pages the other day for the solar filters. I would go ahead and buy one now, though, because the closer we get to April, the harder they're going to be to find. I actually bought a second one in case I end up getting a separate lens and that Mylar sheet through Amazon yesterday, and last night I ordered those, and they're supposed to be here. Supposed to be here today. They should be here tomorrow. And that was just because they're coming to a business address, and it takes buildings closed after 6, so they were trying to deliver them tonight. as Amazon will. But anyway, Mylar is the way to go. I personally think the neutral density will work in a pinch if you don't have a Mylar. And then if you have no filter, about the only time I would use it, this was the cloud cover during the annular eclipse last October. And with the Mylar filter, I couldn't even see the sun. And this was, I would say, about a 40% cloud cover. And there were a couple times I was nervous about taking the filter off and pointing it at the sun, but it was one of the few times you can try it if you get some cloudy weather and you don't have a chance. Just be aware that you still can mess your camera up by taking that filter off, and do it at your discretion. It was
So
kind of obvious for me how much I wanted or didn't want to put one on and
so
try
I
to get that.
so I had a camera I was willing to experiment with a lens that went down to f/32. So I put it, on my smallest aperture, and I took a couple shots. I think when people are burning their cameras up, I suspect they're leaving it on a tripod pointed it
Yeah,
at the
I think
sun, so
so.
they're getting that magnifying glass, kind of
Yeah.
burn. I did a quick, and back down,
And that's
and
exactly what I was doing. Yeah, was pointing it, and then I was, as soon as I was done with that shot, I was pointing it away for that reason, because I didn't want to leave it pointed at the sun. But yeah, good point there. Other essentials that you may need, like I said, if you don't have a built-in intervalometer, or a way to trigger your camera without shaking it, that can be helpful. Make sure you bring a chair. I mean, nighttime photography, it's one of the things I almost always forget, is it's something to sit on. So I end up sitting on the ground, which is no big deal. But it's more comfortable sitting in a chair. Make sure you have a good timer or a stopwatch, or you have your phone set. Especially if you're wanting to do a shot where you're doing a composite, so that you can have it evenly spaced. And literally what I've done in the past is, once you figure out how long it is, divide it by how many ever shots I want leading up to the totality, and set my timer and say, okay, I'm taking it every 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever. Make sure, especially, for the solar eclipse, it's a little more important. Make sure you have water and snacks and things, just because, again, the traffic's going to be crazy. It's better to have some stuff with you and be able to get to it and than not. And then, it's always great to have friends go on trips with you. That way, you know, especially other photographers, I enjoy that way. If I'm having trouble figuring out why my camera is not doing what I want it to do, I can say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing that I'm not doing, or vice versa. And, you know, there's lags as you're waiting for things. It's nice to have somebody to talk to and do. So I always say, make sure, you bring some friends with you. Anybody have any questions so far? Especially on the filters. I know that's a big part of it.
So
I have a question.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I was gonna get your opinion, Mike, on I think I had an ND20. It was like the 1 million. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I know
Anyways,
which one you're
so
talking
it
about.
was
Yeah.
black, and you're saying the Mylar filter won't produce that black and white negative effect. You'll actually get color from it.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I mean, that was one of my pictures with my Mylar, and that was while it was cloudy, but you'll get that bright orange uh sun. The other
Yeah.
nice thing on the Mylars, I mean, you can see some sunspots at times. Um I mean, you're not going to see the solar flares and all that. That's what filter you need for those sort of things are the it's called the hydrogen alpha uh uh hydrogen alpha filter, and they're very expensive, and they actually mount on the inside of your camera in front of your between your lens and your sensor, so they're kind of a pain uh to deal with. It's a whole different thing, but yeah, the Mylars are the way I think to go. And there's several companies that sell those. And the Mylar is the same thing that you have in the, just the cheap cardboard solar glasses.
Hmm.
And so it actually allows you, I found it easier looking through one of those through neutral density filters to actually focus and find where I was pointing at.
Oh yeah, through an ND20, it was just like looking through, like throwing down your welding mask. I mean, you were in the complete dark.
Yeah. Yeah. Patty, I saw your question on the chat. We'll be talking exposures here in just a moment. Uh, so we'll actually get into, I'm going to talk about apps real quick. Not necessarily something that you have to have, but I love Photo Pills. If you haven't ever used Photo Pills, it's a great app. I use it all the time for my nighttime photography. It also will track the sun and do things and give you paths so you kind of know where to expect things to go. It's worth, I think it's gone up, I think it's 11 or $12 now. Somebody told me the other day, but it's a great uh program or app for tracking things, knowing where sunsets are going to happen. It has augmented reality where you can do all sorts of things, find your, um, you know, shutter speeds and things for nighttime photography. I'm not going to really go into that as much tonight, but it's worth having. Uh, even for the solar eclipse, I'm not going to spend, like I said, not spend a lot of time on it. If you have questions about Photo Pills or Sky Portal, which are the two I use mainly again for nighttime photography, but again, they'll show you stuff for daytime as well. Hit me up and let me know. Uh, let me know and I can answer questions on those. To find if you don't know where you're going yet, screen capture this, take a shot of it with your phone, whatever. These websites right here are great, and I'm going to show you some maps and things from these here. But this is where I got a lot of my information when I first started looking about a year and a half ago at both of the eclipses. As far as paths and all just information on the eclipses in general. So we'll leave that up for a second. So if anybody needs to get that, they can. And I can put it up later as well. So how do we find a location? Where do we go? How do we avoid the traffic? I've read recently they're expecting nearly 10 million people in Texas alone. This graphic here gives you an idea. The path of totality, there are 31 million people that live in the path of totality. There are nearly 300 million that are within 1,000 miles of that path of totality. I know multiple people that have told me they know people coming from overseas that, like I said earlier, our president of the guild was telling me last night or today that her brother has 5 friends coming from Finland to Texas. There's going to be a lot of people here, and it's going to be the thing I've heard it equated to, and by multiple people that have been to them, and it's going to be like evacuating for a hurricane. If you've ever seen the footage from Ike several years ago in Houston, freeways were a standstill for a day. It felt like, and I could see that happening. The good news is we're not incredibly too late to plan stuff, especially if you're looking for places to stay. But we're getting to the point where it's harder and harder to find places. I did some research Sunday, just looking at RV and camping and hotels, and a lot of the places in Texas are filled up. And I literally saw places on like Airbnb and some of the what's it it's not hipster hips, forget what it is. There's a camping site where people are literally selling spaces in their pasture out in in central Texas for $500 for the night just to come park your RV and getting that. So there's going to be a lot of people, and I feel like especially the way the cities that crosses with San Antonio and Dallas, and as it gets further north, uh, up into the Midwest, you got some really populated cities. So just be aware and be ready for that sort of thing. Pulled a couple of screen grabs of one of the videos to give you an idea. In Texas, overview of Texas. So as the totality crosses the border, it's going to be right at Eagle Pass. With all the political stuff going on right now, I don't think that's a place I would plan on going. If you don't know, that's where all the border stuff is in Texas right now with that. But anyway, the eclipse, the totality will start about 12:30 Central Standard Time here in Texas, and will last for about 4.5 minutes. And that gives you an idea. It's 120 miles wide that you'll be able to see totality. As we move further up, this is closer to San Antonio, getting up towards Kerrville, Fredericksburg, up in that area. And then as it crosses towards Dallas Fort Worth and then into East Texas. And if you notice, we've lost a little bit of the width, and we've lost a little bit of time as we get further through Texas. And I apologize, I didn't grab anything further on up into the other states, but I do think you lose a little bit of time as you get further.
Do you know where we could find that information?
Yeah, this was on that Great Escape, the
Great American
Eclipse website. And I've got Dan, the good thing on that is it's got a time on major cities. It's also got duration, all that listed on there, but I can make sure I get that on there.
I know by the time it got to Ohio, it was down to like a minute and a half or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one reason Texas is such a popular destination, because it is going to be the longest part of duration. Just a couple general notes. Heat and humidity can affect the visibility. If you have somewhere higher elevation, I mean, most of where it's going over is not high elevation, so that doesn't work as well on this one. Can give you some better view because there's less atmosphere. Watch your weather, just know what's going on around you. That be aware of your surroundings. It's more of when I do lunar eclipses and nighttime photography. And then plan, and then know that, as soon as you've got your plan in place, you may have to change. This is a graphic that got put up several years ago. I loved it. Was when the Saturn and Jupiter were going to conjoin, and it was about what happened in Texas. It was, oh, great, perfect skies. Then the day that they actually, the event you wanted to photograph ended up being cloudy. So,
Yeah, that's Murphy's Law for you.
yeah, exactly. Murphy's Law of photography. And worked for me in October for the annual eclipse too. So, yeah, Carrie, I see your note. And talking about places to go. Carrie, I don't know if y'all saw in the chat, said they're doing a party. There are, I know in Texas alone, there's like 15 different towns that are doing festivals and parties that are multiple days long, multiple,
No way.
there's a music festival going on, and there's just all sorts of things. And we're gonna so what are we hoping to capture? These are two of the kind of examples of the composites that folks want to put together. The corona during totality is one of the things people hope to capture, which is the solar energy that we can't normally see.
So is that possible without a special filter, Mike?
So the corona, and I'll get into this when we start talking about settings.
Okay.
During totality, you'll actually want to take the filter off. And so if you're here in Texas, that we'll have that 4 minutes roughly where you can take the filter off and photograph without the filter on. As soon as we get back to totality ending, you want to have that filter back on, and we'll talk about that here in a second with some of the other items.
Okay.
Bailey's beads, as they're called, are these little flares that can happen during totality. And the key on all of this is being aware of your surroundings and what's going on up that, as you're looking at it. Make sure you don't have your glasses very far, so if something you realize, oh crumb, it's already going out of totality, you can get those back on and you don't hurt your eyes. Same with excuse me, your filter. And make sure you can get your filter on and off easily, and don't cross thread it onto another filter like I did.
And don't crank them down. I just put them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Richard.
Man.
And that's what happened to me. Is I tightened mine too tight, and it got cross threaded with my UV filter.
Yep, I was on there with channel locks trying to, and I was like, God, this can't be good.
The other thing that we may see during the totality are some of the what are called prominences in solar chromosphere, which are the kind of flares in energy that moves out from the sun. Again, we normally wouldn't be able to see with just our white light filter, that Mylar filter. But because the sun will be blocked, we'll be able to see those around the edge. Basically, chromatic aberrations that in image competition we try to get rid of, that we will want in this case. And then the diamond ring effect is the other shot that everybody wants to get, and that is there's kind of a flare. It's kind of like at sunset. Sometimes you can get a flash of light if you're on the water right before sunset. This is right before totality, and then right at the end of totality, there'll be a flare as we end the totality. And so that's another thing that a lot of people are trying to capture when we capture solar eclipses. All right. So how to set up your camera. Of course, every camera is going to be a little bit different. Everybody has a little bit of their own artistic variances on how they like things. What I'm gonna give you a couple basic settings. There's a couple graphs that I'm going to show here in a second that are some of the basic settings on how to set things up. They're going to be with the Mylar filter. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about later is setting up and actually getting out early and photographing with that filter to make sure you know what you need. Basic good starting point to go off of and say, okay, if I don't know anything at all, I'm going to set my ISO around 400. Put my do an F8 for this the focal length, shutter speed about a 400th, and either dial in my white balance on my Kelvin to a 5200 or set it to my sun or daylight setting on the white balance. Again, this is not you're going to get the perfect shot. It may vary, but it's a good starting place for those settings. Obviously, you know, I shoot in manual. I assume everybody shoots in manual. I like being able to dial in each setting. So I'm going to assume people are shooting manual. I do recommend it for something like this just because you can dial in those settings a lot easier. But as you know, you can the higher your ISO, the more noise that you may get surrounding your photos or around your sun and your eclipse photo. And then you can always bump that ISO up if you think it's too dark. That's one of the ways. Shutter speed. Probably for most things, you know, again, depending on your focal length, and the graph I'll show here in a minute will kind of show you some variations. But you're mainly going to be aiming between 1/100th and 1/500th of a second. Much slower than 1/100th of a second, and you may start getting motion blur. And then as far as going higher, you can always go higher. It's just that filter usually kind of keeps it from letting you go a whole lot higher. Just because it is a very dark filter. One of the things that could help you, especially if you're not sure where you want your settings, most of the cameras nowadays will do automatic bracketing. Set it up and let it do some automatic bracketing in your photo. You can always stack those later if you want to. It also will give you kind of a variety of shots to choose from. Yeah, it'll be more to go through when you do your editing, but that's what I'm gonna do for this one is I'm gonna set up at least one of my cameras to do 3-shot bracketing. And if you don't know what that means on automatic bracketing, basically you set your exposures where you want them, and then the camera will take that shot. It'll take one negative, depending on how your camera's set up. I think on mine it's 2 stops down and 2 stops above the settings that I have it. So it just gives you a little bit different photo the other thing that's nice on that, if your first shot is your camera's shaking from you pressing the shutter button or anything, those other two shots will be a lot crisper just because your camera should be settled down by then as well. One of the different charts that I did find, this gives a little bit as we go through the Eclipse, your settings are going to change. But this one was suggesting ISO 200. Like for my lens, the lowest I can go is at 600, I think is 5.6. So you can see is when we're at the full eclipse, you may need a second exposure to get some of the outer lighter corona, which is that atmosphere that we saw earlier, that kind of white wispiness around the eclipse. And that will get, you can see on this chart the variation in the shutter speeds to get those. Same thing for the diamond ring. And again, the diamond ring, you'll have the filter on. The last two, the prominences and the Bailey beads, you may have the filter off, and that's why those numbers are going to be a lot higher for the shutter speed. Plus, they can be very instantaneous flashes. I will send this out to everybody or to anybody that wants it. I've got it in a PDF. Don't get overwhelmed by the numbers on it. It basically is a chart to help you figure out where you want to be during the different parts of the eclipse to give you the best shutter speeds. And it's the good thing is it explains fairly well how to figure it out. You pick your ISO, your f-stop, and then you take that, and from that you figure out where you are, partial, eclipse, getting into the totality, and then trying to capture the coronas and the different levels and brightnesses of those, and it gives you your shutter speed that you want to be at. And I can, if anybody really wants to go over this, I can do it one-on-one because it took me a while to figure out and understand that chart, but it's really is a good chart once you understand it. But I can send it out where everybody can actually have it and look at it and ask questions if they need to. So the other thing to know is obviously the sun's moving. So is the moon, everything, we're moving through the sky. So unfortunately you can't just point it camera in one place and leave it and walk away because it'll be moving out. The good thing is, at 300 millimeters, if you have your camera centered on the sun, you should have about 10 minutes before it is out of frame. At 600 millimeters, you've got about 5 minutes before it runs out of frame, and you have to reposition the camera. But just know that you're going to be moving your camera and tracking it as you go.
So at 600, it says you might be cutting off the corona.
Yes, yeah. During the totality part, if we go back to that previous graphic we had towards the beginning, where we were talking about the focal length stand.
Right.
Yeah, 600. And that's gonna be those outermost parts of the corona. So it depends on how much of the corona you're wanting to capture. And the further out you go, the darker it is and the longer you have to leave your shutter speed open. Couple other tips for getting ready on that. Set your custom functions. If you got a custom settings button, kind of figure out by practice where you need to be and set that as a custom button so that if you do get too far off and all of a sudden your photos are completely off, I can say, go back to my original settings, maybe that the 400 f8, those settings I showed earlier, to where you can say, okay, I can adjust from there back now to where I need to be. But that's a quick way to do it. And I know sometimes I've been in situations where if you get flustered, it's like, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, I just need to start back over at one spot. And a good way to do that is to set your custom button. And then that way you can quickly get back to it. Get out and practice shooting the sun with your tripod, with the lens that you're going to use, with the solar filter. Figure out what settings you like, what color you like when you have it set, what Kelvin or white balance you want. Before the one in October, I spent about 3 different days at different times of the day going out, pointing the camera at the sun and just practicing and seeing what I got and figuring out what I wanted. And that really helped me kind of dial in and know where I wanted my settings to start with during the event and get going a whole lot. If you don't already have one, get your solar filters now, get your solar glasses now. Like I said, Amazon has tons of the solar glasses. And those are a lot easier to find right now than the filters are. But I think as we get closer, it's going to be tougher and tougher to find. Tucker, great question on the teleconverters. It's adding more glass. It's adding more to usually lowering your f-stop. It's kind of you're giving up some to get that extra length, and it kind of just depends on if you're okay with that. I've gotten to where I don't use them for anything just because they do, there is some, even the best Canon ones are give you some lens distortion and such. Yeah, and Jay was asking a question about the Mylar filters. I really do think the Mylar filters are better over the neutral density. Just I think what I saw was you get a better color, Jay, on the Mylar filters than you do on the neutral density. And it's easier to find the sun in your looking through your viewfinder. And I know I wasn't worried about, depending on what kind of viewfinder, which camera you have, looking through that viewfinder and, not having that Mylar filter, because, my camera can be replaced. Insurance would replace it if I absolutely had to. My eyes, or if something happens, I'd rather look through a Mylar filter than a neutral density and mess my eyes up.
What do you think the equivalent is between the amount of light blocking, the amount of light blocking between the Mylar and a neutral density 16? Are they equivalent or?
Pretty close from what I've read and seen.
Yeah.
as far as viewing through it, the Mylars were a little bit better. Which seems counterintuitive because it looks like a solid piece of gray film that you're looking through versus, a piece of glass that you can actually kind of see through. But yeah, I mean, everything I've read, everything I've seen, and just playing with even neutral density filters in the past.
What about distortion through it? Did you notice any?
Through the Mylar?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Okay, cool.
Which again, it's one of those things you would think it would
Because
might
it's
be,
plastic,
but
right?
it's a film. It's a true film.
So do you stick it right on your glass or do you make some kind of contraption?
Well, it depends on what you get. So if you get, let's scroll back to them, and good questions. So if you get on one of the screw on type or the type that slides over and you tighten down, it's more like a just regular filter that you're, UV filter, a neutral density or circular polarizer, that you're putting on your camera lens. And even though they may have, like that one of the ones in the corner has some ripples in it, it looks like, or dents in them, they don't seem to affect the image quality. I know I haven't used just the straight film, but there was one of the photographers in October at the location I was that had, I mean, he was shooting with the R3. He did have the converter because he had the 200 to 400 1.4 extender, that lens. If you're familiar with Canon lenses, and he just had the sheet basically over top and rubber banded, so that it would stay over the, pulled tight and taut, and it worked fine, and he got great shots. I mean, it looked exactly like what I was getting as far as sharpness. I mean, they were probably a little bit sharper because of the camera than what I was getting, but I didn't notice a major difference. The color difference was the main thing I noticed on the neutral densities on the research and what I've played with. Now, I haven't ever used tried a neutral density specifically to shoot the sun, just because I have the Mylar filter and they're supposed to be safer and better. So that's just what I have. I haven't ever played with one.
Yeah, I got
And
the
tried it.
recommended ND20 and it doesn't even allow that much color to come through. It was almost a black and white negative. But
Right.
the one thing I did in editing was to max out my saturation and I guess temperature or yellow.
Yeah.
And I got some, kind of orangey yellow,
Got some color back into it.
yeah, it made it look somewhat realistic.
Yeah, I mean that is that shot with the Mylar filter. I mean, that I may have, I think if I remember right in Lightroom, I literally hit the auto corrections just to see what it gave me, just to pop the little bit of clouds that were in front of it a little bit. And other than that, that's pretty much straight out of camera. I haven't done
Yeah.
any light or
That's-
color adjustment. And so that shows you how much more rich of a color the Mylar gives versus the neutral density.
That's cool though. I'm glad to see that the clouds, didn't totally ruin it. In fact, I think it kind of adds to it a little bit.
Yeah, I did. I mean, and if you go to the very first photo that I have, now that one I actually converted to black and white on purpose, just because I wanted a little less, but because it was such a gray overcast day, it really without the filter, there's not much color to it. It is very more black and white, to kind of give a difference or show you a difference of what you're seeing.
Hey, Mike, there was a question about focus.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dan. What was the question? Sorry, what was I don't see it. What was the question?
Question Penny is asking about are you using
Oh.
the hyperfocal distance?
No, the good thing with and again on the Mylar focal Mylar on the Mylar filter, you can see through it focus fine.
On what? What are you
On the
focusing on?
sun. I just
The edge
pointed
of the
at the
sun?
sun. Yeah,
Are you
pointed at the
catching the
sun.
edge of it? The set?
Yeah, I didn't even at totality, I was still able to see enough and catch enough uh that it wasn't trying to find a focus point. Now I also
I
had
kind of
some
find
more,
when I do night sky, I kind of find I can focus to a point and then just tape my focal
yeah,
ring.
and that's what I was about to say. The other
Okay.
option is, if you have a focus lock on your lens, go ahead and get it before before it starts, because that focal distance is not going to change. Lock it and or gaffer tape your focus ring so that it's set. Um, now, it might be worth doing it for totality for this one because I did have clouds, so that was kind of helping also with my focus, not wanting to move around on a very clear sky during totality. It may be worth, excuse me, guys, locking that focus point in. Um, and if you know how to do your hyperfocal length, you can. I wouldn't get into hyperfocal length because it confuses a lot of people. If you want to learn about hyperfocal links, come to my one of my astrophotography workshops. I'll explain it in immense detail and show you how to find it, and get really sharp photos of, especially of stars. And now the interesting thing is during totality, I don't know how many of y'all photographed in October. It got fairly dark, during totality of the annular. In a total solar eclipse, if you were in, excuse me, hang on, guys. If you were in that path of totality, it will be dark. You may be able to see stars. It will, it may be that dark, especially here in Texas, with it being the path of totality being over 120 miles wide. You will see differences in the sky. The temperature will drop. You may even have animals that react differently. I've seen that in videos and talking with people and reading things that even animals may come out and think, oh, it's dusk, when it's really not, because of it. Let's see. So kind of my baker's dozen of general tips for solar photography, solar eclipse photography, and solar photography. And for April 8th, kind of read through these. Safety first. Make sure you're safe out on the roads. Give it plenty of time. You know, looking at the sun. Make sure you have the right glasses and the right things. And kind of go from there. Make sure you take some time to enjoy it. Don't get so tunnel visioned on your camera that you don't just look up and enjoy what's going on around you. I mean, I know photographers that have talked about in partial eclipses or eclipses, not looking down at the shadows and seeing the cool half circular shadows on the ground from the leaves on the trees because they were so busy tied to their camera. Make sure you look around and enjoy it during the eclipse as well. Take some time between shots to actually enjoy it and just be in the moment as well.
one of the coolest things I've seen from the last one is somebody had a spaghetti strainer, and
Mhm.
through every hole in the spaghetti strainer, it made a tiny eclipse shadow. And I thought that was so cool looking.
Yeah, it is. Um, sorry. Uh, you won't need a flash. Don't even try it. I mean, I saw some things talking about, oh yeah, you can, and this was where news reports don't know what they're talking about. And I think most everybody that's on probably knows enough about photography and doing flash photography, knows no flash that any of us own, even if we had every light we had, would throw enough light to reflect off the moon or give us some definition on the moon, especially during totality. Don't waste your time. Uh, make sure you bring extra batteries. Charge up everything you need the night before, and then always bring one extra. And same thing with memory cards. You just never know what you're going to see and how much you end up shooting. And I'll be shooting with 128 gig memory card, but I'll still have an extra one that's empty and clean and ready to go into the camera just in case. In just case that rare random incident of one corrupts in the middle of a photo shoot. It's just better to have an extra battery and extra memory card for those things. As Dan kind of said earlier, the pre-focus your camera lens, lock it down with some gaffer's tape or a focus lock. Use your custom buttons, as I said. Get out and practice. I mean, we've got a month and a half till the Eclipse. If you've got the equipment, this weekend, I know in Texas at least, the weather's supposed to be nice. Get out and practice. Get some shots. Get out there on a partly cloudy day and see how it affects your filter and your shot. Get out there on a fully sunny day. Get out there at roughly the same time as wherever you are, the eclipse is going to pass. So you know where the sun is in the sky relative to where you are, and just practice. Make sure you can, a lot of times you're going to be pointing that lens almost straight up. You got to really bend down if you don't have a really tall tripod. Practice that and get used to knowing, oh yeah, that I may have to get on my knees to look through the viewfinder and practice finding the sun. If you can, scout your location ahead of time. I know I'm place I'm gonna be is I'm getting there Friday, staying or Saturday, excuse me, and staying through Monday for the eclipse. So that I know where I am and what I'm gonna be doing and where I'm setting up and that sort of thing. Make a checklist before you leave. Make sure you have all your gear. Definitely make sure you have your solar glasses and your solar filter, because those are the two things you need besides the camera. Most of all, for any of y'all that pray, if you believe whatever you believe in, or anyone or anything that you believe in, go ahead and just start praying now till we have clear skies for this eclipse all across, so we can get those great pictures. Number 12, see number 1, which is the safety first, and then see number 2, enjoy it. Again, this is going to be the last one in the United States until for another 20 years. So, we don't know what's going to happen between now and then. And, enjoy it. Put the camera aside, like I said earlier, and enjoy it some as well. And go from there. Any questions on anything I've covered so far?
Yeah, if you got that flash that will light up the moon, that will take care of those clouds for you.
Well, yeah, true, true. I mean, you know, like I said earlier, we're gonna make sure Tucker up there in Panhandle just turns on the big fans and blows everything out.
Do it for $5.
Hey, I'd spend that's a $5 I would spend in a heartbeat.
I think everybody would.